Hey, welcome. Hello. Seems I'm 5 minutes late yet again, same as last week. I don't have a good excuse this time. But here we are, it's Chat with Matt. Today's the 16th of October, it's 2024 still. And we're here, have a chat about whatever's going on, whatever you might want to know about, whatever you think is topical. Just do that. My tripod was sitting unlevel. So yes, welcome. Here we are. What do you want to know about? I'm just sort of getting myself together here computer-wise. Oh, that's right. Barbara reminded me that she asked about not taking on people's stuff last week. She actually asked after the live stream had finished. That does happen quite a bit because it's not always obvious on Facebook that I'm live, or whether it's replaying what was recorded live, and so people think I'm live and I did it a couple of hours ago, and are commenting away and wondering why I'm not responding. Such is life. But not taking on people's stuff. Yeah, well, stuff is an interesting term. Stuff can mean a lot of things. I take it that we're talking about energetic, emotional, energetic stuff that's projected emotionally. And, when people say don't take on someone's stuff, it can be their mental stuff as well. For me, the best way, and I know I sound like a broken record sometimes repeating this, but the best way to avoid taking on people's stuff is to be strong in yourself, right? I have a short saying that helps me remind this: be a beacon, not a sponge, meaning when you are bright in yourself and you're confident in your core, in your solar plexus, radiating your own light out with an intention to be purposeful, right? With an intention to be influential in the world, not necessarily with an intention to influence others to get what you want, but just to be a bright light in the world, then this radiance of light that's emanating from you actually protects you from other people's stuff coming your way, right? Because if you are full of your own light and radiating it out, you're not going to be absorbing the ideologies and the energies and the emotional residues of other people, because you've got this flow outwards, right? This flow of light is basically protects you from intaking other people's projections. Yeah, so Doug said the stuff that stuffed up our stuffed up world, which was in light to the comment he said before, I hope catch up in the garden. If you're not, we've already done a whole heap of gardening since we got back, moved the compost out, fertilised all the fruit trees, done some last minute pruning and some early spring weeding. So yeah, we're all over our gardens here. Not that we have the same size gardens that we used to, but still enough. Yeah, I don't think the world is stuffed up at all, Doug. I know it looks like it for an outside world. The world is actually going through a detoxification process. It's kind of like saying a person's stuffed up because they've got a cold. And we even use that saying, oh, they're all stuffed up. They're full of mucus and phlegm. It's not a pleasant experience to be in, but it doesn't mean that you are unhealthy, right? Having a cold is actually just the process of the body, a healthy immune system, getting rid of toxins from the body that have been taken on in some way. It's very hard to live a full life without exposing yourself to some toxins, whether that be physical toxins or emotional toxins, energetic toxins. Exposing yourself to some stress that creates toxin is normal, and our bodies have the capacity to remove those toxins. Earth, Mother Earth, Lady Gaia, Papatūānuku, whatever you wish to call her, is no different. And while at the moment there's a lot of purging going on, and society is, as opposed to Mother Earth, the society that's riding on her, our funny little experiment here is no different as a life form of its own. It's going through a purge right now, and we are quote unquote stuffed up with mucus, and it's very obvious that we're purging. So the thing is, before the cold breaks out, you're unaware that you're carrying so much toxin because the body has secreted it. And our society has been sort of in a bit of an unaware state for some time, with a lot of different shadow energies and toxins lurking in the background. And now they're all coming to the surface. It's all becoming much more obvious, which seems like we've gone backwards quite dramatically or drastically in the last few decades. But really, it's just the inevitable purging cycle that had to come. And so I don't think the world's stuffed up at all. I think the world is in great shape in terms of purifying very effectively. And while it is going to be unpleasant, and it is going to be traumatic for some people to witness this unfolding of phlegm, right? This unfolding of purge and release, I think we'll come through it. It's just going to take some time, and we just need to have more lemon tea from the old organic lemons that you're growing in your garden, and not worry too much, and just give yourself bed rest, right? And give society the chance to go through this process, which is going to take decades, right? Not a quick thing, but that's the point. I think maintaining a positive attitude is really, really very beneficial, both for us as individuals, to recognize that things aren't going bad and wrong. Things are in a process of purification and healing. But also collectively, the more of us who recognize this, the less we contract around the experience. It's like maintaining the positive attitude towards having your cold, right? If you get really down on yourself and get really fearful of the cold, then it's usually protracted, and then you start taking pharmaceuticals as an example to try and mask or overcome the symptomology because you keep wanting to soldier on, and you actually suppress the toxins back in the field. So I think the more that we can accept and actually rejoice the fact that all of this toxicity of our world is coming out to be seen, the better off we're going to move through this experience. The more empowered, in a more empowered fashion, we will move through and effectively cleanse the world right now, rather than seeing it as bad and not wanting it to be present and thinking it's doom and gloom. Jill said, this protection through being a beacon of light giving outwards are my words about my mistletoe essence. The second, here we go. The second one of my trio. The first one is focusing on accepting we are all loving light at our core, then radiating outwards. Then the third one is linking up in the network of centers across the world, getting protection through sharing and giving. Yeah, awesome, Jill. I love that. So Jill makes different flower essences of her own volition, whatever, intuition. I'll use that term. Her own knowing around what flowers to use as opposed to the standard ones. And so that's a great trio to recognize and accept that we are the light, to then positively radiate it and show it to the world, and then to recognize others around us that are of light, and to allow these natural connections which are already there, right? It's not that we have to try to connect up with others. The connections are there. It's just the more that we recognize that the connections are there, the more effectively they can serve us and work for us in both ways, right? Work for us singularly as the being, as the person, but also us as the collective, right? As more and more of us recognize that we are a global network of light, connected through heart centers, or whatever you want to call it, beacons lighting up to reinforce each other and create a network of pathways of communication, communion, and interconnectedness, the more effective that is, of course. It's very hard to have something being utilized if we're not recognizing it. So the more that we can recognize it and appreciate, the more that we can utilize these natural phenomena. E.g., we're all connected. And those of us who radiate and resonate with similar frequencies and intentions obviously have strong connections with each other and pathways of supporting each other and inspiring each other. Anyway, so getting back to Barbara's question, not taking on people's stuff, I think it's important to recognize that in not wanting to take on people's stuff, you're actually opening a pathway to do it. The aversion towards, quote unquote, people's stuff, right? This fear of people's stuff is actually an invitation to be overly influenced by it. What we focus on, we feed, and what we feed grows stronger. Where our attention goes, the energy flows, right? So if we are concerned that people's stuff is creating influence in our lives, negatively affecting us, then it tends to. I know it's a fine line between being aware of potentials and not worrying about it, right? It's useful and human to care about a lot of issues, but it's not so useful, although it's still very human, to worry about those issues. The difference between care and worry is the amount of mental spinning your wheels that goes behind it, right? The mental overthinking that goes into worry simply is a waste of energy and attention on what you don't want to have happen. So when it comes to not taking on people's stuff, I think it's useful to reinforce that inherently we are sovereign, and there is no stuff that is inherently hard for us to avoid, inherently hard, right? Of course, there are emotional ties and historic, habitual ties that create certain affinity for certain stuff or certain people to have influence in our life, triggering stuff or triggering people who have their stuff, tend to be more difficult for us to stay immune from. But that's our work, right? And being aware of that helps us to overcome it, but worrying about it doesn't. So the pathways to staying sovereign are simple, right? Back yourself, spend time, invest time in reinforcing your own energy, radiance, but not from a place of fear. So it's not like having to radiate your light to avoid taking on people's stuff. No, you radiate your light because it's joyful to radiate your light. It's joyful to be an expansive expression of yourself, a positive influence in the world out there, right? That's a joyful experience for you as a soul, for you as a being, right? To actually be yourself here on the planet in a more effective way. The byproduct is you are very well protected when you do that, right? So we're not doing it to protect ourselves because that would be a fear-based reason. Anything that's done from a foundation of fear doesn't have nearly as much effect or positive potential as something that is done from a loving intention. So when we choose to radiate our light out to the world and be strong in our core and our heart and maybe our third eye, whatever we perceive as where we're, the centers that are radiating this light out through our being, and the essence of our energy that's going with this light, right? We're infusing it with our own individual, unique essence of being, which is useful, right? Because as we radiate our uniqueness, we actually help to filter the external world as to what resonates more with us. Other beings who are also radiating their light will pick up on our essence and the amount of affinity, the amount of resonance, or what's the other word then? Alignment. That's the word I was looking for. The amount of alignment that's there will help to influence who comes into our life and who stays away, right? Who is repelled, who feels that this essence doesn't feel good to them, right? And there will be people, right? No matter how divine I am, my light, my essence is going to repel some people because they're not on the same page as me. That doesn't mean they're worse than me. It just means they're different. They're going down a different path. And so, and conversely, the people who do feel an affinity with the essence of the light that I'm radiating will be attracted. And this is how it works, right? We repel those who aren't in an affinity and we attract those who are. For that process to work, we have to be willing to put ourselves out there, because if we stay hidden and shielded, then that doesn't happen, and we're based on trying to logic and work out and bump into each other until we find out whether we are in resonance, right? Because we're not actually just broadcasting that as a fundamental aspect of how we are being. So so the point is, the more that we can show up and invest time, do practices that help us stay strong energetically in ourselves, the less naturally we will take on other people's stuff, and the more protected in all sorts of different ways we will find ourselves. And also the more confident we become to deal with stuff in the external world, deal with what we might have found in the past to be unpleasant or difficult, right? Confrontation of some description, having to tell people hard truths, etc., right? Taking on other people's, not taking on, but receiving people's potentially unwelcome, interesting points of view, right? When people come up and tell us stuff, criticize us, etc., right, from their point of view. We can't stop that happening. It's foolish to think that we should be protected from having that happen. What we want to become is someone who can have those sorts of experience and not be overly influenced by them, right? To have a strong energetic digestion, that someone can come up and tell us their interesting points of view and us see it for what it is, their interesting point of view, and not get offended and not get defensive around having to prove that they're wrong, right? Because we just see there's no need to prove anything to anyone, because they've got their interesting point of view, which is different from your point of view on a certain subject, whether it be about you or about anything, and that doesn't matter. And that doesn't matter, right? We can let them have their point of view, and we can still feel very confident in our points of view. And we don't have to work out which point of view is right, because there is no right and there is no wrong. People just have different points of view based on their history, based on their education, based on their uniqueness, and that's absolutely fine. And so there doesn't need to be an argument, there doesn't need to be a debate, there just needs to be respect. And while some people might not show respect because they are in their own fear and wanting to convert you, when you are strong confidently, they just don't have a hope, and so they will soon give up in wasting their energy trying to convert you, when you are just simply strong in your knowing, and you don't need to berate them. And at the same point, you don't need to take their shit either, right? You can tell them the truth from your point of view, and that will generally sort the situation out if you are confident but not confrontational, right? So you don't initiate a fight, you just basically state your point of view and your confidence in your point of view and your desire not to have to argue with them, because you can see that there will be no winners in an argument. Jill said, circumstances are testing my resolve to not take on the stuff of my ex-boyfriend. He's terminally ill and in massive... what's the word? Massive levels of pain. Well, hey, He has attempted to drag me back into his coercive control bubble. Thankfully, I'm 4 hours drive away, but it's tough to reject him repeatedly now. He phoned me at 4 a.m. on Sunday as his cat died suddenly, and he was speaking like it was his final straw. I didn't go, but it's a battle between resolve and guilt. Yeah, so the interesting thing there is, Jill, is to work out why there's guilt, and to resolve that for yourself, right? It's to resolve the guilt. Yes, you have a deep knowing that it's not going to serve you to get dragged back into an unhealthy relationship with this person, right? As they are passing and they have a lot of their own stuff. And it is important that we all recognize that it's useful to pick our battles carefully. People that we have past connections with that may have been deep, and obviously, spousal type relationships or sexual relationships, fundamental romantic relationships, are those types of relationships where it can be very triggering to have correspondence with, interactions with these people. But to help you maintain your resolve to stay more removed from the situation and to hold space for his process, right, from afar, to hold space rather than to become entangled and sympathetic in the experience, right? It's good to be empathic, not so good to be sympathetic. When we become sympathetic, our energy comes down to the level that we are sympathizing with, right? And when people are in a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration at their situation that has evolved due to their past and their handling of the past, then to sympathize with that is of no use. It doesn't help them. It might make them feel better in the short term, but it actually only reinforces their experience when we sympathize with it. And it certainly doesn't help us to dull our light down and go down to their level. So look at what is triggering the guilt that you should go. And of course there will be societal expectations there, but that's mixed. Societal expectations around, comforting someone through this experience when they're an ex-partner. That's, society has very mixed views on how much interaction we have with our past partners. Some people have very strong beliefs that once it's over, and you never have any contact with them again. Which is an interesting point of view. I get it. It can be helpful in some ways to avoid, the unpleasant emotions associated with that, the guilts, the remorses, the angers, the frustrations, the wanting to blame, etc., and potential jealousies of any other relationships that are currently in place, etc., right? M said, the guilt is usually projected into our people-pleasing or coping mechanisms. Yeah, exactly. We have people-pleasing mechanisms that we've been trained into, recognizing what the kind thing to do would be, right? Kind is an interesting word, isn't it? It's kind of crazy, this projection of kind, where we don't upset anyone. We don't upset anyone. That's what kind is, not upsetting people. It's got nothing to do with what serves them. It's got nothing to do with what would be best for them. It's all to do with what would not upset them, right? What would please them from an egoic level. That's kind. It's kind of fucked up. That's what kind is. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for being kind, but it is a very, very slippery slope, the kind slope. And it's the kind of slope that ends you in murky situations. The bottom of that slippery slope is not pleasant. Into the pig shit. Not always, but so yeah. You're very right, Em. We feel guilty when we displease others and when we don't give them what they're asking for, even if we recognize what they're asking for is not healthy for them or us, right? Not useful, not beneficial, not purposeful, and we still feel pangs of guilt that we should, right? We've been trained into this idea that we should meet their requests and their needs, and not to be unkind because that feels hurtful and selfish, right? When it's not at all. Jules added more to this. The guilt centers on the passing of my previous partner who ended his life when faced with severe ill health. I have worked on this and received messages from him recently that I shouldn't feel guilty, but yeah, and that comes down to the ideology that ending one's life is a bad thing to do, right? Why is suicide put on such a bad pedestal, right? And I get it. Some suicides are absolutely tragic. People end their life for very silly reasons. Potentially being terminally ill and recognizing that you have very little capacity to make improvement from where you are, I don't think is a terrible reason for suicide. I'm not advocating that everyone should suicide, by the way. I'm just have with my own dance with, you know, with this, you know, thought patterns. I recognize that a lot of the dance with suicide is linked in the guilt that suicide is very bad and wrong, which is definitely a projection or an education that has been largely perpetuated by religion, Christianity in particular, making out that suicide is a very big sin. And then I got a lot of messaging from Spirit, if you like, around how that came into place, that the church took up the cause to try and reduce suicide was basically to stop the slaves from killing themselves, right? Because that's just not good for business, for the wealthy people who are selling slaves and buying slaves, right? You don't want to buy a slave and then have them suicide. You don't want to be in the process, in the game of selling slaves and have them kill themselves, right? And the world used to, and still does to some extent, run on slavery. And many people could point out that all of us who are caught up in the consumerist society are basically slaves to the wealthy, and I don't like to call them elite, but those beings who basically sit above the system and make a lot of money and energy out of the system, right? Having people kill themselves, people who could still be working or consuming, is not good, right, for business. So we don't want that to happen. So a lot of the contraction around suicide, and I know suicide is an absolute tragedy for those associated, right? No one wants, especially when it comes to young people, have them leave the world when there's so much that could still be experienced, right? And it feels like a complete failure to those of us who are in their family and we didn't, quote unquote, help them. We didn't help them find their happiness or whatever, or we failed to support them in whatever pain was consuming them that drove them to this decision to end their life. But all that aside, I really want to help people let go of the idea that it's a massive sin and you'll be punished for suiciding in the next life, because I don't believe that's the truth. As someone who has suicided many times in other lifetimes, for various reasons, some of them very legitimate, right? About to be captured, about to be tortured, etc. And others not so obvious, just racked with my own pain and not feeling that I was supported to work it out in some way and come to some degree of happiness that was worth living through. So I've had multiple experiences of this in other lifetimes, and there's no punishment for it, right? Yes, there's guilt on the other side when you see other people grieving. That's true, and that can be a punishment onto its own, but there's no absolute punishment by some higher power. That's the point. It's only our own psyche that we have to work through, and there is certainly lots of loving support to help us through that. I'm not encouraging people to suicide. In fact, I believe, and I have talked with many people who have had suicidal tendencies with this same message, to help them get out of it, because this, I don't think, as long as we're at war with something, the problem will never go away. It's like the war on drugs. How well has that gone? That was Ronald Reagan's campaign, I think, back in the late 80s, are we talking, right? The war on drugs. We just saw a flourishing of drug use from that point on. The war on terror that came next, right? The war on terrorism has had a similar effect, right? It's just created more terrorists. It hasn't actually diffused any situation around that. The war on suicide is no different. As long as we are making something wrong and bad and trying to fight to stop it happening, it's not going to go away. What you fight against, you actually feed, right? And fighting against suicide is actually feeding the energy of suicide. We have to come into loving acceptance that suicide is a human experience, and then from there work to support people who may be dancing with this concept so that they can make the best choice for themselves. And I believe for the vast majority of people, the best choice is to keep living, but that's not an absoluteness, right? So the point is, coming back to Jill, there is no reason to feel guilty that a previous partner chose suicide as a way to deal with their terminal illness, and that you should prevent this other ex-partner, from doing the same. It's not your job to encourage them to suicide, but not your job to try and stop them from suiciding, and it's not your job to keep them happy so that they don't suicide. Your job is to hold light with positive intention from afar. If communication becomes too sticky and entangling, that they have the best outcome for them, and that they find peace and happiness in their situation, which is hard, right? It's hard to find peace and happiness when faced with terminal illness. It's very easy to get frustrated and resentful and fearful, but we can definitely hold light that they have experiences energetically in their dreams that help them find peace with the passing process and peace with the experience of having an ill body that can still teach us many things and give us many opportunities to have experiences that are valid as we live out a life with terminal illness that can still be very purposeful for ourselves and for others around us, right? Even if we're in pain, even if it's really hard going, there are lessons there that can be useful as we progress into the next life, right? Into the astral, and then whether we incarnate back on Earth or wherever we go, it doesn't really matter. But the experiences that we can have with a terminal illness are definitely valuable ones, right? And so it's there for us. But not all souls will choose that, and not all personalities will choose that. And some personalities don't feel that they're capable, and they'll choose suicide. And that might be a shame for them that they didn't choose that thing. But the experience of suicide is also a valid experience to have for a soul, and there's learning to be done in that, of course, in the other side, and then whatever. So the point is not to see any particular scenario or act as absolutely good or bad, right? That's the point. Yes, exactly. So much love, big breaths. And I'm glad that helps, Jill. It is a big topic, and I know this might be triggering for a lot of people who are listening to this, because suicide has touched a lot of us in one way or another. Either we danced with, the thoughts ourselves and felt really guilty about it and really scared of it, that maybe we would do it or whatever. I have a very strong belief that my soul or my higher self won't allow me to leave the world until I'm ready. And so I have let go of any fear of death, no matter how it might come. Personally, that's a big statement, Matthew, and it's probably complete bullshit. I don't think I've let go of any fear at all, but I've let go of a lot of fear around death, and I've had to let go of the fear that, in a moment of frustration, that I could do something stupid and end my life, because carrying that fear is a real burden. It's a real burden that then, only drives you deeper into depression, really, and deeper into fear. And I don't want to live from fear. If I'm going to be on this planet, I'm not going to live from a foundation of fear. What's the point? I'm not going to, avoid things out of fear. Anywho's, we've definitely done our half hour, and it's been a big conversation. We've started the conversation talking about how to avoid other people's stuff, and then we really got into some deep stuff and some very triggering stuff in the conversation around suicide. So apologies if you find yourself a little bit triggered by that. I don't really feel bad about it. I don't intentionally want to trigger anyone, but I do recognize that some things need to be triggered in order to be processed and worked through, and to develop a more expansive or empowered relationship with things that can be very limiting in our subconscious and background life. If you do need more help with this, please feel free to reach out. I can talk more personally with anyone around this concept and how it might have affected you. Either if it's your tendencies, or you've witnessed someone else, or someone else in your life who has the tendencies and you're worried that they might do it, etc. Right? It's a big thing. Jill said, by the way, minutes before my Sunday's middle of the night phone call, which is about the death of ex-partner's cat, my cat jumped on me and purred loudly in my ear. He knew I needed his help. Yeah. Awesome. Em said, breathe deep. So much light in this space we face. We need what we need together. Yes, as we face what we need together. Yeah. So as I was basically saying, don't be shy. Reach out to someone if you want to talk about this, and if you want to talk to someone like me, then you can talk to me. If you're willing to have differing points of view on this. But anyways, I think what's important is to not feel so ashamed of this topic, right? Because the more that we bury it, the more that it will subversively influence us in deep ways. So anything that's, seems taboo, talking about sex, talking about suicide, talking about politics, whatever, it's not healthy, right? We need to be willing to talk about subjects so that we can move forward with them. And so that's it. It's time to overcome a lot of these taboo subjects, because it's disempowering us. And a lot of these subjects have been made taboo to keep us disempowered around them. And it's time to reclaim our power. That's what this time is really about, is the old structures that have kept us safe in confinement and in structured rule-based living are falling apart. We have to empower ourselves now to be able to make our own decisions and walk our own walk in this world, and not just simply be a robot following the rules, doing what we're supposed to, and progressing on a ladder of supposed success, right? And then supposedly finding happiness at the end, because as we all know, there's no happiness at the end of that ladder of doing what we're supposed to based on, you know, the consumerist corporate model of life on the planet. So the times are changing, and it is safe to discuss and explore these topics. Of course, it is prudent to choose wisely who you have the conversations with, so that you just don't get slapped in the face by people who aren't ready yet to have these conversations. But the energy, the fundamental energy is supportive of these conversations happening. That's the truth. Not everyone is on board yet. In fact, the majority of people aren't on board yet, but those of you listening to this and who dance in our circle are, you know, leaders in this regard and showing the way. And so we have to find little enclaves of community to have these conversations with, to help normalize it, so that we can radiate the normalization of these conversations to help other people who are still resistant to go there. M said, I can literally feel trauma related to this, leaving my body to the ground as I relax. Awesome. So keep relaxing. That's an awesome reminder to us all to stay grounded as we dance through what is triggering time, right? And there's triggers happening on all sorts of issues right now, different wars that are being brought to us in graphic detail, all sorts of shit happening, you know, what's happening with children in various parts of the world, what's happening to our society, what's been happening politically, and there's all sorts of shit that's really disturbing. And we have to be willing to become aware of it, and to find acceptance around it. That doesn't mean that we accept that it's going to keep happening. It means that we accept that it has been happening, and not to get into this fury of fight, because that doesn't help. We have to just become very, very intentional what we stand for and what we are going to radiate and what we are going to advocate for. Advocating for the outcomes we desire rather than fighting against what we see as bad and wrong is the way forward. And it's not easy, and it requires us to feel supported by some form of community, and to be inspired also when we get down by said community or others in our lives. So that's what we're here to add to, some form of community and support and inspiration. Anyway, my friends, I better get moving. Much, much love to you all. I will speak to you again next week, same time, same place. Bye for now. Bye-bye.